Thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Why and the Buy podcast. My name is Christy Walters, and I'm joined here with Jeff Bajorek. Hi, Jeff. How's it going?
Great, Christy. How are you?
I'm doing well. So what's our topic today?
I'm really excited to talk about this topic because this one was my idea. We're going to talk about analyzing and really measuring the right kind of data for your business. It's important to pay attention to the right things and focus the activity on those things in order to be most effective in your business. And with episode 1, the most important lesson we learned is to start recording when you start talking.
Right. Hey, always have fun, right? At the end of it, always learn and always have fun.
That's right. So this book, How to Become a Rainmaker, I love all the little tidbits and it makes you think about things a little bit differently and concepts you hadn't even thought about. But the first time I read this book, I just kind of read through it and it was fine. And there were some things that I liked and there were some things that I thought I might like, but didn't think I could try. And that's a big sticking point.
And has that changed?
Yeah, it changed when I changed jobs. We get set in our ways. You kind of get into a routine, regardless of any job that you have or anything that you do on a regular basis. You find your ways to approach things. You find a way that you do things. And it's really easy to get set into those ways. And it's really hard to get out of those ways, even when things aren't going well. And what I did was I took an opportunity when I changed jobs. This was from my first real job in sales to my second. And I went back to a chapter that I saw in this book, one that I had previously dismissed, but I decided that it was simple enough to put into play and that it made enough sense that I was willing to risk putting a new system in play. But one of the things that I found in this book was a point system. And what they say is, there are 4 major steps in every sales cycle. You've got to identify a lead or get a referral. You've got to set up an appointment for a meeting with that prospect. You have got to have the meeting, okay? And ultimately, you need to obtain commitments in those meetings. So the whole idea was give yourself a point for identifying a prospect, give yourself 2 points for scheduling a meeting, 3 points for having a meeting, and 4 points for having a meeting that leads to a commitment, right? So you almost get a bonus point for that meeting if you can close at least a portion of that sales process. And the book goes on and says, well, if you score 20 points a week, you'll always have a full pipeline, you will always be closing deals, and you'll always be growing your business. And I said, come on, that's too simple. Oh, I'm already entrenched in what I'm doing. How can I possibly adapt this? And well, when I got that new opportunity, I put it into play. And there are a couple things that I learned. One, I was really, really busy with my previous position, 50, 55 hours busy. But when I went back and tried to score that activity, I was only coming up with 7 or 8 points a week.
Yeah. And so when was this? Give us a timeline.
2008. This is middle of the year. This summer, 2008.
Okay.
And then what I noticed was when I started to put this into play and I started just trying to score points.
Right.
And I said, 20 isn't enough. I've got to score 25. And the funny thing is when I shot for 25, I'd often score 30 in 15 hours.
Right.
So when it as it relates to data and key performance indicators and all these other kind of acronyms that we want to put into it, right? What are you doing?
Right.
And is the activity that you're engaging in for your sales process, is it valuable or is it just activity? And busyness does not translate very well to business very often. And
to channel our friend Tim Ferriss, right?
Well, yeah. No,
he's not crazy. I mean, the 4-hour work week, when I first heard it come out, I was like, come on, really? Yeah. But the more I read some of his ideas, and some of them don't work for everyone. Sure. But there are a lot of incredible gems in that book. And he talks about exactly that. We are a society that is so enamored with busyness, and that busyness in many people's eyes relates to success. And in reality, one has nothing to do with the other. No. Because being overly busy or overscheduling your time or not having time for others or not having time for family doesn't make you any more successful. It just makes you more stressed out. And in a lot of cases, you can cut out probably 60% of the activities that you're doing and still be just as successful and a heck of a lot more happy.
Oh, at least. I mean, I went from working 55 to 60 hours a week and just kind of getting by to really focusing my efforts on about 20 hours a week and doubling my business. When you look at what's really important, and we can take this a lot of different ways. I mean, as it relates to your key performance indicators, as it relates to the activities and entering data into your CRM, what are you entering, in terms of what you're doing? Are the emails that you're sending worthwhile? Are the phone calls you're making, are they worthwhile? Take a step back. Are the things that you do every day in line with the things you want to be one day?
Right.
Have you made time for your family? Is that more important to you than work, or is work more important? If work's more important, then don't make time for your family, make more time for your work.
Right.
Whatever it is that you decide that you want to do and whatever it is that you decide you want to be, as it relates to data, are you measuring the right things? And is the activity that you're putting into your process achieving those measurements?
Right, absolutely. And so we're really focusing in on the subject of data and analytics, especially as it relates to sales, but really to any aspect of business, right? We've got several books that we used as inspiration for this topic, some that are near and dear to Jeff's heart, some that are very near and dear to mine. You've heard us mention a couple of these already, such as How to Become a Rainmaker by Jeffrey Fox and The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. The other book that I really love, and Jeff, I thank you for making me go back and read it after I actually watched the movie. So the book Moneyball, and for those of you who aren't familiar with this book, it is not just about baseball. There is another layer of golden nugget in this book, and that's all about data. It's all about taking those preconceived notions, those preconceived biases and beliefs that we have, setting them aside and letting the data tell a story for you. And that's exactly what they did with the Oakland A's story. And I love, there's so many, I wrote down so many gems, both on how they managed the team, how they picked certain players, to even the types of coaches that they saw were valuable or not valuable, where those that were, heavy hitters didn't make great hitting coaches because they kept expecting everyone to do it their way. When in essence, someone that came in with that experience was willing and open to letting the player decide the direction that he wanted to go, and then just coaching him along the way to success. So there are just a lot of really interesting nuggets in here. But the biggest one for Moneyball for me was just that concept of challenging beliefs and notions. And I think about it in the corporate world, your things you think about or you think you know about your industry, especially for those that maybe have been in the same industry for a long time. For you, it was healthcare. For me, it was security. I see it a lot of times in my clients today where they think they already know what their customers want, so they don't feel like they need to go back and ask that question again. But, oh, by the way, they haven't asked it in 10 years. Right. And half of those clients have merged or gone away, and they have a completely different mode of operation or goal that they're setting for their customers. So it's a really an interesting way to take a look at just those things that you think are just givens. We'll talk on another session about sacred cows, because that's one that I've been thinking about quite a bit. But when you look at data and the use of data in the corporate environment, as opposed to just saying, well, this is what we've always done, this is what we believe, oh, well, that won't work because it's never worked. Let the data tell a story and accept the story for what it is and build your business off of that is a huge element of dealing with your sacred cows. Be okay with killing them or setting them aside sometimes. So that's the book that I think I like the most. I love the outliers. You had the outliers on your list too. Do you want to talk about why?
I would like to talk about why. And I think I can dovetail right into that from what you were just saying, especially about Moneyball as it relates to the game of baseball. And baseball, unlike any other sport, any other major sport, is so steeped in tradition that people hold on to these beliefs and they hold on to the way you do things. And why aren't they bunting? Why aren't they stealing bases? Why aren't you manufacturing runs? And if you're really into baseball, like I grew up with the game, then you'll kind of appreciate those terms and how they're really not approached that way anymore. But a couple of the lessons right in step with what you brought up from that book are, one, having a fresh set of eyes to look. And when that fresh set of eyes comes in the book, it's a man by the name of Paul DePodesta, who is now a general manager with one of the teams. In the movie, he's played by Jonah Hill under an alias who was created for the movie because Paul DePodesta did not want to be mentioned in the movie.
Ah, okay.
Which is an interesting little trivia fact there for you. But someone comes in who's not a baseball guy, Yale economist,
right.
Real just smart guy, looking at patterns, looking at trends and saying, look, wins break down to runs. Runs break down to people being on base and not giving away outs. So don't get caught stealing. You just gave away an out. Don't bunt the ball over. Don't sacrifice bunt people to move people over along the bases. Mathematically, that doesn't make any sense. And I don't care if this guy hits a bunch of home runs. I don't care if he, hits for power, hits for average, whatever it is. He's not on base as much as these other people are on base. You can't score runs unless people are on base.
Right.
You look at all those things and you look at the value that was placed upon defense instead of offense as a result of this. The game of baseball professionally has fundamentally been changed as a result of these really smart guys just coming in and applying their talent. And I think there's something to be said about having a fresh pair of eyes to come in and say, why are you doing it this way? I just want to know so I can help myself get into a space where I can be better, or more effectively help you. And I think, Christy, that's what you and I do when we help our clients. You certainly don't need to hire someone to ask those questions, but it's much more difficult when you get set in your ways and you get into these patterns to ask those questions of yourself.
Right.
The interesting thing is now, as that relates to outliers, is that, and the whole way that Malcolm Gladwell sold this book was the story of success. So we're going to pick up this book and we're going to read about hard work. We're going to read about diligence, and we're going to read about discipline, and we're going to read about the 10,000 hour rule and the Pareto principle. And this is going to be an in-depth study of how successful people became successful. And Malcolm Gladwell gets into this book, and I don't know how many pages it is. It's 7.5 hours on audio, like I listened to it. And he talks about how success very often, quite often, boils down to not just the work, but being in the right place at the right time to apply that work, to apply that practice. The fact that Bill Gates and Steve Jobs grew up in communities where they had access to technology and computers, where people in other places didn't. It's not that Steve Jobs wasn't going to be a success. It's not that Bill Gates wasn't going to be, wildly successful as well, but probably not in computing if they weren't born at a time when computing was just at its genesis. And that is kind of the amazing thing. I think we take for granted the breaks that we get when we're ready to take advantage of opportunities. How the majority of professional hockey players were born in either January, February, or March.
Right.
Well, because when you split up, youth hockey by birth year, someone who is born at the beginning of January versus someone who is born at the end of December, they're in the same birth year, so they're counted the same way. But when you're 8 years old, playing with someone who just turned 9. I mean, that's
it's a big deal. And it's
fundamentally a full year sometimes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it feeds into your psyche, right? I mean, if you've ever had a child go through competitive sports, then you have seen how success or what is labeled as failure affects them at that age. And it's huge when they feel they can conquer the world, right? I mean, it makes a big difference. Now, I'm not advocating for participation awards. That's a whole other podcast.
Right.
But I do think that ability to win early and get the success and the confidence under your belt makes such a big difference. And a lot of what he studied in that particular story in Outliers illustrated exactly that for even your really talented, successful sports stars. A lot of times, even with sales, how much of it is talent versus hard work. I mean, I'm amazed sometimes at the people that I run into who think I can never do sales. And you even tell stories about that early on in your career,
right?
Because there's a belief that you have to be this hard driving, in your face kind of salesperson that's trying to wrench away that contract. And sales really has changed so much. And a lot of it is not just about the talent. It's about the talent of the organization. It's about the talent of the support people behind you. It's about, are you in front of the right individuals? Did you come into the organization at a time where you were introduced to the right kinds of clients? So that if you come in, after a company has really hit its mark and you've got kind of all the people who are left, that's a little harder, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of it is timing. Over talent. I love one of my favorite quotes is Heinz Ward, and I can't remember who was interviewing him. One of his coaches told him that hard work beats talent when talent doesn't try. You can walk in the door with all the talent in the world, but if you're not willing to put the system in place to consistently make those home runs, and in sales, that's the key too, right? You're not willing to put the hard work in place. Eventually, hard work's going to win out over you. And a lot of people who don't come in or don't feel like they come in with that given level of talent work harder on building their system and building the data, that the framework that they use to judge whether or not they're successful in the business. So I think it's huge to figure out kind of what's your compass. Right? So what are you using to measure yourself, and are you looking at it with the right perspective?
And that's a great question. I mean, and that's the question, right? I mean, the first question is, what are you measuring, and do the things that you're measuring really line up with what you deem success to look like? The second thing is, how are you measuring it? What do you determine those key performance indicators to be? And then how do you track your progress on it?
Right.
For me, it was just looking at this very simple process. You break selling down into 4 different categories: prospecting, setting appointments, having sales conversations, and then closing deals.
Right.
A lot more that goes into it. There are a lot of smaller intermediate steps between there, and there are a lot of techniques that go into it. But at the end of the day, what are you trying to do?
Right.
Move people through a process. We're trying to get through a process. And so simply for me, assigning a point value to each one of those steps, and then knowing that you can't close deals unless you prospect. You can't have meetings unless you get time set aside to have meetings, to do demos, to make presentations. Then you have to, you can't just overload or end load one of those 4 different categories. They all have to be constantly moving. So the system itself is in place to perpetuate the system itself. And that was just such a simple way for me to measure things.
Yeah.
It used to be a simple way for me to measure things, and I use it to this day. And one of the things I like about such a simple system is that it is easily modifiable to any industry, to any product, to any kind of a salesperson. You can tweak each one of those steps. You can add categories. I've added categories with some of my clients where they actually get points for orders. So it's another step. Once you get a commitment, is there an order that comes through that gives you another category, or adding other key performance indicators to that mix, but still coming up with a point total at the end of the week.
Right.
That also helps to make it a game. It's really easy to make it a competition that way. Who's going out and doing what they need to do, and what's the prize?
Right.
And I think those are questions that any organization needs to ask now. Am I measuring the right data? How do I measure it? And how do I make it fun and engaging?
Right.
It never hurts to be fun, right? It's not that it has to be fun, but if it can be, why isn't it?
Yeah. Right. We have fun.
Absolutely. I firmly believe that if you're not having fun, you're doing something wrong.
Right.
So if there's a way that a sales manager or a vice president or a local manager, a branch manager, or a team leader, if there's a way to motivate your team by making things fun, have you explored it? If you haven't, then why not?
Right.
It's simple, and I think that the data all feeds into that, because the data provides, as you mentioned, your compass for, am I doing this the right way?
And it's objective, right? We all tell our own stories. We all see things through our own lenses based on our experience. So you have to be really careful when you're on your own, much like you and I are, or you're in a corporation. You've got to be careful that you're measuring something that is truly objective, so that you know that you're not over suggesting how much you're doing to bring the clients in, or under reporting. There are a lot of us that under report, right? Because it's like, oh, well, that conversation didn't result in a sale, I'm not going to count that. But in the end, that's ultimately a step in the right direction. So, I mean, it's all about making sure that it's objective and not subjective as well. And that's why the data makes a big difference.
Oh, I totally agree. So let me shift gears a little bit. When is there too much data?
Oh, a lot of times. A lot of times. And I have seen this so much with my clients too, where management gets excited about some of the data that they see, and data does tell stories. And if you look at trends a different way, it can start to spin everyone around. So if you're coming into each sales meeting with a new spin on the numbers, then there's something wrong. You really need to get very clear on 2 or 3 key performance indicators that are going to make the difference, and let people focus in on those things. Now, it doesn't mean that if you decide that, oh, wait, our lead generation campaign isn't working, doesn't mean you don't track leads anymore.
Right.
It just means that you have to change the campaign and how it feeds into that information. But I think if you go over 2 or 3 key performance indicators that your salespeople have to be responsible for, ideally, I'd even want to see 1. Sometimes you need a more well-rounded program that's going to reward different types of salespeople, and that's okay too. But I think that everyone gets lost if you add too much to the mix.
Well,
so and then you really have to be careful not to get buried by the data. Well,
and then data collection becomes a job, right?
Oh yeah, it's analysis paralysis, right? Then all of a sudden people are afraid to take a step in a certain direction because they feel like they don't have enough data in their toolkit to move forward. And you've said this a couple of times, even in our conversations, sometimes you just have to hit send, or you just have to pick up the phone.
Right.
There's preparation, and then there is preparation, right? I mean, you just really have to be careful that you don't go overboard and you don't allow that to become a crutch. I talk a lot about productive procrastination because it's something that I perfected over the years. And
wait, I thought I perfected that. Hold on.
No. I think I own that one. So, and I think that's where data can become dangerous. You don't want to get your business or the individuals involved in that analysis paralysis phase. And you don't ever want data to get in the way of taking action. I'd rather take action with little data than sit there and churn on the data and lose time because I was too afraid. So I think that's where it could go too far.
How do you find that balance, and what do you believe that balance to be? I mean, do you have a time? Have you settled into an amount of time to prepare for your meetings and with your prospects, or that you recommend to your clients to prepare? I mean, is it an hour per meeting? Is it 15 minutes per prospect before you pick up the phone? I mean, can it even be boiled down that simply?
It can be. It depends on your business, right? It depends on the conversations that you're having and how complex your selling solution is. If you are selling something that's very straightforward, it's a product sell, and the key elements of the key benefits to your customer from selling that product, then maybe it's only 10 or 15 minutes. It's learning what you know about them, having your 3 or 4 questions so that you can continue the conversation. If if you pick up the phone and go, "Hey, how are you today?" "Fine." "So have you heard of our company?" "Yes." So when you get that individual, you're going to need to be creative. So I think that requires a little bit of preparation. Once you've got some experience under your belt, though, it should just be picking up the phone. Understand who you're calling. Why are you calling? Don't waste their time. What's your objective? What are you going to call success on this call? when it's over? So is it to get a meeting? Are you calling to give them information? Are you calling to collect an order? What's your objective in making this phone call? And then just pick up the phone and do it, and be okay with winging it. Sometimes you over prepare because you feel like you don't know enough, like you feel like you need to have more. And I suffer from this. But it's sometimes you have to force yourself to just go ahead and make that phone call, get that meeting. You really don't want it to be more than 15 minutes. If your objective is to get a meeting, it shouldn't be more than a 15-minute phone call, right?
Right.
Catch up. How are the kids? Have you heard about this? Can we get together?
Right.
That should be pretty straightforward. Right. So over preparation happens as well. And I think it depends on where you are in the position that you're in. If you're brand new, over preparation isn't a bad thing, because you want to be able to anticipate some of the questions that you're going to get. But you also want it to seem like it's not a stiff, over-rehearsed presentation either. So you got to find that balance. And I think that once you've done that 2 or 3 times, then you just need to have confidence that you got it and go. And so what's the worst that can happen? I've done this with a couple of clients too. It's like, tell me the worst if you failed at everything, if you just royally mucked this up, what's the worst that can happen and how permanent is it?
Right.
Because you got to name that fear sometimes if the fear is crippling you.
Oh, there's no question about that.
Yeah.
I think that's a podcast for another.
Fear is a podcast. That's absolutely true.
Fear is a podcast. But yeah. I think, when it comes to what we're trying to measure, right? And preparation is probably another podcast or 5. But the idea of what are the parts of your process that require measurement? How do you measure them? Are you focusing on the details that really matter? And how does that data and how does that process relate to the goals that you're setting? All of it has to tie together.
Yeah.
So if you are leading a sales team and you say, okay, guys, okay, ladies, go out there. I want you all to deliver $100,000 worth of revenue this month. Go. Okay. How would you like us to do that? Right. I think that just having someone, setting a goal and telling people to go is like handing people, or it's like sending people on a scavenger hunt without any clue.
Right.
And I love that there's no cookbook to sales. You're allowed to do it the way you want to, but you still need to know what you're trying to accomplish beyond bring home the number, right?
Right.
So I think the best way, and in my experience, the best way to divine that data is to look at your current clientele. Look at your current customers. Look at the people who love doing business with you.
Right.
Ask them why they do business with you.
Mm-hmm.
Ask them what led to that decision. What have they realized as a customer that they weren't realizing before they started to work with you?
Right.
Look at the characteristics of your best clients and what do they all have in common?
Right.
And that helps to then identify who it is that you're truly seeking. And when you can identify those prospects and help them in ways other similar customers and prospects have been helped before, now you're beginning to really define what those KPIs are.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's very true. And you can't, if you haven't given them any information previously, you're going to be shooting blanks. You're not going to really be targeting anything of value in your sales process. You might get lucky a couple of times, but it won't be sustainable.
Thank you for joining us today on this episode of The Why and the Buy. You can check out our show notes at thewhyandthebuy.com. Christy, what are we going to talk about next time?
So next week, we're going to talk about sacred cows. You don't have to kill them, but you do have to understand them. And that's all about the beliefs that we have in our personal, societal, business systems that are preconceived and a given. Are you questioning them on a regular basis? So we're going to have some fun with that. I'm excited about this topic.
I'm really excited about that topic because we really need to change the way we think about things if we want to change our results.
That's it. So that'll be our next week's topic. Thank you all for joining us this week. And remember, when you understand your whys, your hows and your whats get better.